Hello everyone and welcome to this video podcast on the last days. My name is David and the title of this episode is Enoch's Prophetic Timeline of the Last Days, Part 3, with a subtitle of Tribulations, Tribulations, and More Tribulations. This is episode 26. When I think of Enoch and chapters 6 and 7 in the book of Moses, which cover Enoch's overarching visions and prophetic timelines, I think of two related things: questions, questions, and more questions, and visions, visions, and more visions. And I think of these two things because these two chapters are loaded with Enoch's persistent questioning and the Lord's response in the form of a series of visions, with questions leading to visions and visions leading to questions, and often with the same question being asked over and over again until Enoch finally gets an answer, such as, "When shall the earth rest?" which Enoch comes back to time and time again, and which leads us to the next slide and an interesting observation pertaining to Enoch's preoccupation with the cleansing and redemption of the earth. So let's turn to that now. Now, when I refer to Enoch's preoccupation with Project 3 pertaining to the millennium and the redemption of the earth, I am referring to our three major cleansing and redemption projects mentioned in previous episodes. And while Enoch was certainly aware of and attentive to Projects 1 and 2, as it relates to the gathering of Israel in these latter days, and as it pertains to the redemption of Zion in the New Jerusalem and the redemption of Israel in Old Jerusalem, he nonetheless appears to be especially concerned with Project 3, that is, with the cleansing and redemption of the earth, and, further, as to when this redemption will take place. Consider, for instance, these four inquiries of the Lord, first by the earth itself, and then on behalf of the earth by Enoch, who seems to have taken up the passionate pleas and cries of the earth as of special interest to him personally. Consider the following, wherein we have the earth crying out, "Woe, woe is me! When shall I rest, and be cleansed from the filthiness which is gone forth out of me? And when will my Creator sanctify me, that I may rest, and righteousness for a season abide upon my face?" And then we have Enoch taking up the cause of the earth throughout these series of visions in these words, "And it came to pass that Enoch cried unto the Lord, saying, When the Son of Man cometh in the flesh, shall the earth rest? I pray thee, show me these things." Which is followed with these words, "And again Enoch wept, and cried unto the Lord, saying, When shall the earth rest?" The point is that a great deal of our understanding of Project 3 pertaining to the cleansing and redemption of the earth, along with its timing, comes from the writings of Enoch and can be found in chapters 6 and 7 of the book of Moses. One might also wonder as to why Enoch was so personally invested or preoccupied with the cleansing and redemption of the earth. And I believe that answer might be found in what one might refer to as a E.T. phone home moment, as in the movie E.T., the extraterrestrial, wherein Enoch is anxious to go home, or in this case, to return home. And so while Enoch certainly is no extraterrestrial, his desire to return home to planet Earth is certainly understandable. I say this because we come to discover in these writings of Enoch that Zion, or this city of Enoch, which has broken off and fled from the earth, is to return home and to the earth in these last days. And as part of the restoration of all things, and as part of the ushering in of the 1,000-year millennial reign of Christ, wherein the earth shall finally rest for a season from the wickedness that was found upon its face. But, and this is key, what Enoch learns from these series of questions and visions is that this cleansing and redemption project is not to be completed for another 5 and even 6,000 years. And so it is that information that leads us to our next slide and to what I am calling Enoch's overarching 6,000-year timeline. I call this Enoch's overarching 6,000-year timeline because it consists in a series of visions that extends, for the most part, from the birth of Noah in the rounded off and approximate year of 3000 BC, and even unto the end of the world at the end of the millennium, and in the approximate year of the Lord, 3000 AD. Now, to gain an understanding as to why Enoch received this overarching 6,000-year timeline, one has to remember that these various visions were a direct result of the numerous questions Enoch was asking the Lord, one of which came as a result of Enoch beholding both God and the heavens weeping over the destruction of the wicked in his day, and which Enoch could not understand. And so he asked, how is it that the heavens weep and shed forth their tears as the rain upon the mountains? Enoch is then shown a vision of Noah's day and of the great flood, which we will speak of and map out shortly. Then, with this cataclysmic vision behind him, hope is held out that a Savior would come to the earth to atone for the sins of man on conditions of repentance. And so Enoch immediately inquires as to when this would take place. For the next question Enoch asks is, when shall the day of the Lord come? When shall the blood of the righteous be shed? The answer he then receives comes in the form of another vision, wherein Enoch is shown Christ's day in the meridian of time, which we will also speak of and map out shortly. As part of this second vision, Enoch sees Christ's resurrection and ascension into heaven, and this leads Enoch to ask yet another question, which goes as follows. And he called unto the Lord, saying, Wilt thou not come again upon the earth? The answer is yes, but it would take place in the last days, wherein Enoch is given a vision of all the tribulations, and more tribulations leading up to the millennium and the end of the world as we know it. And it should be noted that throughout all these various visions and numerous questions, we have Enoch continually asking, when shall the earth rest? Now, it might prove helpful if we add 2 additional dates as part of this overarching timeline, with 0 AD as an approximate date for the beginning of Christ's day, and 1800 AD as an approximate date for the beginning of these last days. At this point, then, I have chosen to add 4 key elaborations to each of these 3 time periods, based on the materials provided by Enoch and found within each of these various visions, beginning with Noah's day and the great flood. For in this first vision, Enoch foresees Noah and his family, along with the building of the ark, which is followed up by the tragic vision of the wicked refusing to repent, and ultimately the wicked being swallowed up by the flood. Notice also that all 4 of these key elaborations are taken directly from these visions and writings of Enoch, as found within the book of Moses. As we move from Noah's day and the great flood to Christ's day in the meridian of time, we have the following 4 key elaborations. First, that Christ is to come in the meridian of time, and that this was to be in the days of wickedness and vengeance, the type of wickedness and vengeance that would lead to the Son of Man being lifted up on the cross. But this is not all Enoch foresees, for he not only foresees Christ being crucified, but Enoch also foresees Christ's resurrection and ascension into heaven, which is what leads Enoch to ask if the Lord will come again, and which also leads us to Enoch's visions of the last days, even up to the end of the world. The 4 key elaborations I have taken from Enoch's writings and visions of the last days are as follows. First, that Christ was to come again, not in the meridian of time as many in Christ's day had falsely supposed, but in these last days, and that this would also take place in the days of wickedness and vengeance. And as a result of this wickedness, great tribulation shall be among the children of men in those days. Nonetheless, Christ will return, usher in the millennium, and reign upon the earth for 1,000 years. And it is during this 1,000-year millennial reign that the earth shall rest for what is called a season. So, yes, the Lord will come again, and yes, the earth shall rest. But before that day, all hell shall break loose. And for those who remain on the earth in those days, there shall be tribulations, tribulations, and more tribulations to contend with. Now, with that having been said, it might be worth noting that from Enoch's perspective, all three of these visions and time periods were in the future and were yet to be fulfilled. But from our perspective, the days of Noah and the days of Christ in the meridian of time are in the past, and our concerns are with today and where we are in the year 2022. And so let us now turn from Enoch's overarching 6,000-year timeline and dial in on Enoch's prophetic timeline of the last days, and in far more detail. Now, up to this point, we've done a great deal of our scriptural homework by making a study of Enoch's writings and visions in these past few episodes. And one of the things we discovered along the way is that there is a great treasure trove of information pertaining to these last days, to be found in Enoch's final vision of the end times, all of which are captured in just 7 verses. That is, within Moses chapter 7, verses 60 through 66, as shown here. Now, evidence that we have discovered such a treasure trove of information pertaining to the last days and these end-time events are 2 passages, the first of which reads, "And the Lord said unto Enoch, As I live, even so will I come in the last days. And the day shall come that the earth shall rest. But before that day," and the second of which reads, "And it came to pass that Enoch saw the day of the coming of the Son of Man in the last days, to dwell on the earth in righteousness for the space of 1,000 years. But before that day," in other words, before the earth shall rest, and before Christ's 1,000-year millennial reign, such and such signs and events shall take place. It is also interesting to note that in both instances, the Lord informs Enoch that great tribulation shall be among the wicked, but my people will I preserve. And so when we speak of tribulations, tribulations, and more tribulations taking place among the wicked in these last days, there should always be added the important footnote that my people will I preserve. In any event, it is at this point that we will want to apply our last days 4-step guide to doing your own scriptural homework covered in previous episodes, beginning with step 1, which is to collect the signs of the times within these 7 verses and place them on our last day's fig tree in preparation for step 2. So let's do that scriptural homework now. The first step, then, is to gather the signs of the times and place them on our last day's fig tree, with each fig leaf representing a sign of the times. In this case, I have identified 14 signs of the times, or end-time events, and listed them as I came across them. So let me quickly read them off to you. And, by the way, while I'm reading through this list, see if you can notice anything unusual or odd about the language Enoch uses to describe these last days events. for something is going on here that I was not aware of at first, but which I picked up on later. With that challenge in mind, let me proceed with this list of prophetic markers or signs of the times. Here then is the list of what Enoch foresees. Heavens darkened, and veil of darkness covers earth. Heavens and the earth shall shake. Great tribulations among the wicked. Sea is troubled, and men's hearts fail them. Righteousness comes down out of heaven, and truth out of the earth. Righteousness and truth will sweep the earth like a flood. Gathering of elect to Zion to preserve and prepare them. Christ's presence shall be in the New Jerusalem. Coming of the Lord to be in the last days. In the days of wickedness and vengeance. Zion, the city of Enoch, shall return. Zions from all creation shall meet. Christ to reign on earth 1,000 years. Earth to rest for the space of 1,000 years. Having now collected and placed all 14 signs of the times in the form of fig leaves on our last day's fig tree, we are now ready to move on to step 2. Our second step is to classify these 14 signs of the times based on an orange, yellow, and green color code, which is designed to represent their current status of already fulfilled, being fulfilled, or as yet to be fulfilled. Now here's where things can begin to become a bit confusing, given the complexity of the signs of the times, wherein a great number of these signs have multiple fulfillments, or are of a continuous nature, so that they are found to fall into all 3 color-coded classifications. For example, this threefold classification is the case with our first sign of the times on this list, wherein it is stated that the heavens shall be darkened, and a veil of darkness shall cover the earth. After all, the prophet Joseph Smith received a revelation clear back in 1837, D&C 112, verse 23, wherein the Lord declared that gross darkness covers the minds of the people in his day. Well, things have not got any better and are bound to get worse. So how do we categorize this? Now, if this initial confusion were not enough, we find that the next 6 prophetic markers or signs of the times on this list are also equally complex. Fortunately, the final 7 end-time events or signs of the times were far easier to classify as yet to be fulfilled. By the way, it was this complexity that first alerted me to the fact that something else was going on here that I needed to pay attention to. In any case, and for reasons which you shall soon see, I decided to color code all 14 of these signs of the times as yet to be fulfilled. I'll explain later as to why I made this decision. But for now, all 14 fig leaves on our last day's fig tree are going to be represented as yet to be fulfilled. This then takes us to our third step. The purpose of our third step is to chart out all these signs of the times according to a last day's color-coded timeline by rearranging them in such a way that all the fig leaves are grouped together and in sequential order from orange to yellow to green. However, in this instance, all the fig leaves are already grouped together as green, and so we can simply skip this third step, meaning we are ready to move on to step 4. This is the step where we design a prophetic timeline based on the 6 key parts or elements that ought to be part of every prophetic timeline, and as listed here: prophetic blockchains, prophetic themes, prophetic markers, prophetic time frames, our prophetic black box, and our reminder that there are to be no future target dates. What this means is that we need to take the time to identify how many prophetic themes we want to include in this timeline, and then place each of these 14 signs of the times, or prophetic markers, under the appropriate theme and within the boundaries of the appropriate blockchains that make up one's prophetic timeline. So let's turn to that now. Here, however, is where things begin to bog down, and where I found myself going back and changing the color code on numerous of the fig leaves in order to make them fit under familiar prophetic themes that I had identified. So notice that I now have orange, yellow, and green fig leaves. And further, notice a few of the familiar prophetic themes that I placed these various colored fig leaves under, such as coming judgments, restoration of the gospel, gathering of Israel, and so forth, and all of which led to a complete breakdown of Enoch's prophetic timeline in the sense that I had lost the color-coded and sequential nature of these signs of the times. These difficulties and complexities brought this project to a halt until it finally dawned on me that what I was struggling with was a tension between two last days scenarios in the form of the end is near versus the end is here. In other words, in my first few attempts at identifying a series of prophetic themes to place these complex signs of the times under, I was approaching Enoch's prophetic timeline from the familiar the end is near perspective, and did so until I realized that we were not dealing with the end is near, but with the end is here. Let me show you what I mean. For instance, instead of speaking of wars and rumors of wars, Enoch speaks in different terms of days of wickedness and vengeance. Instead of speaking in terms of earthquakes in diverse places, Enoch again speaks in different terms of the heavens and the earth shaking, reminding one more of those very end times wherein the earth shall tremble and reel to and fro, and the heavens shall shake. And instead of speaking in familiar terms of the gathering of Israel from the four quarters of the earth, Enoch instead speaks in the far more focused and specific terms of gathering the elect to Zion. And, again, instead of speaking in terms of coming judgments, Enoch speaks in different terms of great tribulations among the wicked, and so forth and so on. At this point, I had to clear my mind and rethink my the end is near approach as it applies to Enoch's timeline. And so I went back to two passages that I was well aware of and which I believed might hold a key to unraveling these difficulties and complexities. So let's read through these passages once more and add the key insight that I had been missing. First, we have Moses chapter 7, verses 60 through 61, which reads, "And the Lord said unto Enoch, As I live, even so will I come in the last days. And the day shall come that the earth shall rest. But before that day, great tribulations shall be among the children of men, but my people will I preserve." Now the key insight I was missing was the understanding that Enoch's vision was of what took place right before the earth was to rest, which clearly makes his vision of the very end times, meaning the end is here. We can do the same with Moses chapter 7, verses 65 through 66, which reads, "And it came to pass that Enoch saw the day of the coming of the Son of Man in the last days, to dwell on the earth in righteousness for the space of 1,000 years. But before that day he saw great tribulations among the wicked." Again, the key insight I was missing was the understanding that Enoch's vision was of what was to take place right before Christ was to reign on the earth for 1,000 years, which again clearly indicates that Enoch's vision was of the very end times, meaning the end is here. And so it was this insight into Enoch's vision that led me to shift my approach from the end is near to the end is here, and to look at all these signs of the times as applying to those horrific events that were to take place right before Christ's 1,000-year millennial reign and right before the earth was to rest for a season. In any event, I decided to approach Enoch's prophetic vision and timeline of the last days from a different perspective by dividing up his timeline into 3 consecutive and sequential themes, and as follows. First, I have what I am going to refer to as a pre-tribulation prophetic theme with a subtitle of Zion, or the New Jerusalem. Next, I have a prophetic theme which I have chosen to refer to as Great Tribulations, with a subtitle of The End is Here. And lastly, I have what I am going to refer to as a post-tribulation prophetic theme, with a subtitle of The Millennium. My reasoning, and why I believe I am correct, is that the Lord appears to be laying out Enoch's prophetic timeline in a backwards fashion. That is, the Lord first shows Enoch that, yes, the earth shall rest, and yes, Christ shall return and reign on the earth for 1,000 years. But right before that day, Enoch is shown the great tribulations that are to take place among the wicked, and is given the important notice by the Lord that, my people will I preserve. With those insights, I could now diagram out Enoch's prophetic timeline of the last days. So let's turn to that now. Here we have then Enoch's prophetic timeline of the last days, as worked out from the previous slide. So let's go ahead and enter our 2 prophetic time frames, with the date 1830 representing the restoration and the coming forth of the Book of Mormon at one end, and the approximate year of 3000 AD at the other end, representing Enoch's comment that the Lord had shown him all things, even unto the end of the world. I have also made a small space available in this diagram so we could locate where we are in the year 2022. We can now lay down each of our 14 prophetic markers, beginning with Enoch foreseeing that righteousness shall come down from heaven and truth out of the earth, along with the reminder of the complexity of many of these signs, which, no doubt, have multiple fulfillments. Enoch, then, foresees that righteousness and truth will sweep the earth like a flood, and all is part of the gathering of the elect to Zion, or the New Jerusalem, with its dual purpose of preserving the Lord's people from the great tribulations that have befallen the wicked, and as a place wherein the saints might prepare for the second coming of the Lord. Enoch also notes that Christ's tabernacle or presence shall be in Zion, or the New Jerusalem. We can now move on into the Great Tribulation time frame, taking note of the fact that the end is here. And so we have the heavens darkened and a veil of darkness covering the earth. Again, the reminder of the complexity of these signs of the times and their multiple fulfillments. Next, we can take note of the fact that these are times wherein the heavens and the earth shall shake, and great tribulations shall be among the wicked. For the sea is to be troubled, and men's hearts are to fail them, as they look for the judgments of God to come upon them. Now it should be noted that the coming of the Lord will be in the last days, in these days of great tribulation, which the Lord declares to be days of wickedness and vengeance. With Christ's return in these days of tribulation, we then have the ushering in of the millennium, beginning with Zion, the city of Enoch, returning to the earth. And not only that, but with it, the Zions from all the creations, which shall meet and join together, which is followed by Christ reigning on the earth for 1,000 years, along with the earth itself resting for the space of 1,000 years as well. By the way, and as an interesting side note, we have good reasons to believe that the sign of the Son of Man, which all the world shall see at the coming of the Lord, is none other than the return of the city of Enoch, which shall accompany Christ when he appears in the clouds of heaven. Consider, for example, these words in the Joseph Smith translation of Matthew chapter 1, verse 36, which reads, "And as I said before, after the tribulation of those days, and the powers of the heavens shall be shaken, then shall appear the sign of the Son of Man in heaven. And then shall all the tribes of the earth mourn, and they shall see the Son of Man coming in the clouds of heaven with power and great glory." With all that having been said, we can now place our prophetic black box, representing the two great unknowns, that make calculating the day and the hour of Christ's coming impossible, along with the reminder that because of these two unknowns, there will be no future target dates in this timeline. As one final note, to me, the message of most importance in Enoch's prophetic timeline is the hopeful message that regardless of how horrific, cataclysmic, and terrifying these great tribulations are to be, that are to take place right before the ushering in of the millennium, we can rely on the promise that Christ will preserve his people, the people gathered to Zion, the pure in heart. I will speak about this promise in the next episode. We end then with another prophetic timeline alert, reminding everyone that there shall be great tribulations among the wicked, right before Christ reigns and the earth rests. But my people will I preserve in Zion, declares the Lord, and unto a place which I shall prepare, an holy city, and it shall be called Zion, a new Jerusalem. Now you might be thinking that we are done with Enoch's prophetic timeline of the last days. But this is not so, for there are still a few remaining insights that we can garner before we move on to our next prophetic timeline. And so our next episode, episode 27, will be part 4 of Enoch's prophetic timeline of the last days, with a subtitle of Tribulations, Tribulations, and More Tribulations. Thank you for watching. Push the like button if you enjoyed this episode, and be sure to push the subscribe button. Until next time, stay vigilant, for ye know neither the day nor the hour of his coming.